A cartographer's mistake in 1440 created a nation where nobody was in charge. And somehow it worked. Stand right here. Look at this map from the 15th century. You're looking at the exact moment a clerical error rewrote history. Two Italian city-states, the Papal States and the Republic of Florence, sat down to negotiate their border. They drew a line, or rather they tried to. One of them, historians still aren't entirely sure which, made a mistake, and that mistake left a sliver of land unclaimed. A gap, a nowhere place. Let me rewind, we need context. The year was actually around 1440. The Papal States, the Church's territorial holdings, sat directly east of Florence. Both wanted the same stretch of Apennine foothills. It was valuable land, defensible, taxable, so they negotiated, they drafted treaties. They drew boundaries on maps with the seriousness of empire builders. What they didn't do was agree on what happened between two specific geographic points. The gap they created was small, maybe 30 square miles. Not nothing, but not Rome either. It sat in a valley between San Marino to the north and the Papal States to the south. For centuries, both powers simply ignored it. They didn't occupy it. They didn't tax it. They didn't send soldiers. It was a blind spot, a bureaucratic orphan. But the people living there, farmers mostly, who'd been working that land for generations, they noticed. By the 1500, they understood what happened. They weren't subjects of the Pope. They weren't subjects of Florence. They belonged to nobody. And in that vacuum, something remarkable took root. They declared themselves the Republic of Cospaia. Not in a grand ceremony, not with a constitution or founding fathers. They just said it, quietly, methodically. And then they did something even more radical. They governed themselves with almost no government at all. Here's where it gets curious. Cospaia had no formal constitution, no executive, no written laws. What they had instead was something closer to direct democracy through consensus. Decisions were made in the piazza. Disputes were settled by neighbors. There were no police because there was almost no crime, no tax collectors because there was almost no taxation. They functioned on trust and collective memory. For 400 years, from roughly 1440 until 1826, this place existed. A functioning microstate with no formal government. No king, no parliament, no police force. And it survived. It endured. Merchants knew about it. Historians documented it. Neighboring powers tolerated it because, frankly, it was too small to matter and too peaceful to threaten anyone. The real oddity. They had one export, one thing that sustained their economy. Tobacco. They grew it. They processed it. They sold it to merchants from Florence and Rome and beyond. The Pope's own officials would buy Cospaian tobacco. It was contraband in papal territory, technically, but nobody enforced it. It was a wink and a nod arrangement that lasted centuries. You'd think this would collapse. Internal conflict, bandits, exploitation, chaos. But the records show something different. Crime was minimal. Disputes were settled locally. Nobody starved. People lived there for generations, the same families, the same names, the same relationships. It was stable, boring even, which is exactly why it worked. The secret was scale. Cospaia was small enough that everyone knew everyone. Small enough that reputation mattered more than laws. Small enough that breaking the social contract meant real, immediate consequences, not from authorities, but from your neighbors. It was anarchism that worked because it had to. Then came the Napoleonic Wars. The old map, the one with the error, stopped mattering. Napoleon reorganized Italian territory. The Papal States were absorbed into larger structures. San Marino miraculously survived, but Cospaia didn't. In 1826, the papal government finally asserted control. 400 years of accidental freedom ended, not with a bang, but with bureaucratic inevitability. What's remarkable is what came after. Cospaia's citizens didn't resist violently. They integrated. They paid taxes. They accepted laws. And historians noted something. The transition was smooth, almost peaceful. 4 centuries of self-governance hadn't created resentment or instability. It had created a community that understood cooperation. So what does Cospaia teach us? That government isn't always necessary. That some of the most stable societies in history were small, trust-based, and informal. The cartographer's Typo in 1440 created conditions for an experiment in anarchism that nobody planned and everyone forgot about. The map that created Cospaia still exists, by the way. You can see it in archives. And every time I look at it, I'm struck by how much of history hinges on mistakes, on the things we didn't mean to do, on the gaps we left behind. Subscribe if you want to keep discovering the forgotten moments that shaped our world, the stories that hide in the margins of textbooks, waiting for someone to notice them. Subscribe, there's a forgotten story, like this one, waiting every week.